Picture, if you will, the first light of dawn breaking over the misty peaks of Mount Fuji, where ancient cedars stand like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with morning dew that catches the earliest rays of sunlight like scattered diamonds. This is Japan at the moment between night and day, when the veil between worlds grows thin and the whispers of the gods seem to drift on the mountain winds. Here, in this land of rising mists and sacred waters, mythology does not merely exist as distant tales from forgotten times, but breathes through every shrine gate, flows through every river, and rustles through every bamboo grove that bends gracefully in the eternal dance of seasons. The Japanese archipelago rests like a sleeping dragon in the vast Pacific, its volcanic spine curved in a gentle arc that has witnessed the birth of gods and the tears of goddesses, the laughter of spirits and the footsteps of heroes who walked between the mortal realm and the celestial courts above. In the Shinto tradition, this sacred geography pulses with an energy that Western minds might struggle to comprehend. For here, the divine does not dwell in distant heavens, but inhabits the very stones beneath our feet, the ancient trees that tower toward the clouds, and the streams that sing their way to the sea. As twilight deepens and the first stars emerge like celestial lanterns hung in the purple sky, we find ourselves drawn into this timeless realm where creation itself began with the stirring of primordial waters, where the sun goddess once hid in a cave and plunged the world into darkness, and where fox spirits dance in moonlit forests, while water demons lurk in the depths of tranquil ponds. These are not merely stories to be consumed and forgotten, but living vessels of wisdom that have guided the Japanese people through countless generations, teaching them to see the sacred in the ordinary, the eternal in the fleeting, and the divine in the natural world that surrounds them like an endless embrace. Tonight, as you settle into the gentle rhythm of these ancient tales, allow yourself to drift like cherry blossoms on a spring breeze, carried along by narratives that flow like water over smooth stones worn smooth by the passage of countless tellings. Let the modern world fade away like morning mist, and open your heart to the profound truths that emerge when gods walk among mortals, when nature itself becomes a character in the great drama of existence, and when the boundary between the seen and unseen dissolves like salt in the endless ocean of consciousness. In the beginning, before the islands existed, before the mountains rose from the sea like the spines of slumbering dragons, before the forests grew thick with bamboo and pine, there was only the vast expanse of churning waters beneath an empty sky. This primordial ocean stretched without end, its surface broken only by the endless dance of waves that rose and fell in patterns older than memory, carrying within their depths the seeds of all creation, waiting for the moment when divine hands would reach down to shape the world. From the celestial realm above, two figures emerged to stand at the floating bridge of heaven, their forms radiant with the light of creation itself. Izanagi, whose name means he who invites, and Izanami, she who invites, gazed down upon the chaotic waters below with eyes that held the promise of worlds yet to be born. In their hands, they carried the Amenenu-hoko, the heavenly jeweled spear that sparkled with crystalline light, its surface reflecting not just the light of the heavens, but the infinite possibilities that swirled within the cosmic darkness. Together, these divine siblings raised the sacred spear high above their heads, its jeweled surface catching the light of distant stars, and then plunged it deep into the roiling waters below. As they stirred the ocean in great sweeping circles, the brine began to thicken and coalesce, forming currents that spiraled like galaxies in the making. The water clung to the spear's jeweled tip, and when they finally lifted it from the depths, droplets of sacred brine fell like tears of joy back into the sea, each drop solidifying as it touched the surface, growing and expanding until the first island took shape beneath the watching eyes of heaven. This was Onogoro, the self-forming island, a place of profound significance that would become the foundation upon which all of Japan would rest. Its shores were kissed by gentle waves that whispered secrets of creation, while its interior rose in rolling hills covered with grasses that swayed in breezes that carried the breath of the gods themselves. Here, upon this newly formed land, Izanagi and Izanami descended from their celestial realm, their feet touching solid ground for the first time, their hearts filled with the wonder of creators who have witnessed their vision made manifest. In the center of Onogoro, they erected a pillar of divine significance, the Amenemahashira, which stretched from the earth toward the heavens like a bridge between the mortal and divine realms. This sacred column became the axis around which their courtship would unfold, for the two deities, drawn together by forces as fundamental as the tides, began to walk around the pillar in opposite directions, their eyes locked upon each other with the intensity of stars gravitating toward their destined collision. When they met on the far side of the pillar, Izanami spoke first, her voice like the sound of wind through temple bells, expressing her joy at their union. But this breach of celestial protocol, this reversal of the proper order, would cast a shadow over their first attempts at creation. The children born of this union were malformed, ill-fated beings that could not survive in either the celestial or terrestrial realms, reminding us that even among the gods, the cosmic order must be respected, the ancient patterns honored. Learning from their mistake, they began the ritual anew, walking once more around the sacred pillar. But this time, when they met, Izanagi spoke first, his voice carrying the authority of heaven and the tenderness of a lover. From this properly ordered union came the islands of Japan, each one emerging from their divine embrace like children born of love and cosmic harmony. Awaji Island rose first, followed by Shikaku, then the great island of Honshu, with its towering mountains and fertile valleys, and finally Kyushu and Hokkaido, until the archipelago stretched across the Pacific like a necklace of emeralds, scattered by a benevolent god. But their creative passion did not end with the formation of the islands, for from their continued union came the kami, the countless deities who would govern every aspect of the natural world. There was the god of the wind, whose breath would fill the sails of fishermen and rustle, the leaves of autumn maples, and the goddess of the mountains, whose peaks would pierce the clouds and hold the snow that would become the rivers flowing to the sea. The deity of fire emerged, crackling with energy and warmth, bringing light to human homes and power to forge the tools of civilization, while the spirit of water flowed forth, gentle and life-giving, nourishing the rice fields and filling the wells from which humanity would draw sustenance. Each birth brought joy to the divine couple, their love growing deeper with every deity that emerged from their union, their hearts expanding to encompass the growing complexity of the world they were creating. The forests sprouted gods of their own, spirits that would dwell in ancient trees and whisper wisdom to those who knew how to listen, while the seas welcomed deities of tide and current, storm and calm, who would guide the ships of merchants and the nets of fishermen across the windark waters that surrounded their island realm. But creation, as all acts of profound love, carries within it the seeds of tragedy. For the final child born to Izanagi and Izanami would be Kagutsuchi, the god of fire, in his most violent and uncontrolled aspect. As this blazing deity emerged into the world, his flames scorched his mother's divine form, burning her so severely that she began to fade like a flower touched by frost. Even as she lay dying, Izanami continued to give birth, creating from her final breaths the deities of metal and earth, clay and water, as if her departing spirit sought to balance the destruction caused by her last child with the tools that humanity would need to rebuild and create anew. Izanagi's grief at the loss of his beloved knew no bounds, his tears falling like autumn rain upon the newly formed islands, each drop giving birth to new deities of sorrow and longing, of memory and loss. In his rage, he drew his divine sword and struck down Kagutsuchi, the child, whose birth had cost him his beloved, and from the scattered pieces of the fire god's body emerged the volcanic peaks that would forever remind the islands of Japan that creation and destruction are but two faces of the same cosmic force, eternally intertwined, like lovers in an endless dance. Unable to accept the finality of death, even divine death, Izanagi resolved to journey to Yomi, the underworld realm where the spirits of the departed dwelt in shadow and silence. This dark kingdom lay far beneath the earth, accessible only through hidden caves and secret passages that ascended through layers of stone and soil until they reached the boundaries of the land of the dead. Here, in this realm of perpetual twilight, Izanami had taken her place as ruler, her divine radiance dimmed but not extinguished, her beauty transformed but not destroyed by her passage through the gates of death. When Izanagi finally reached the shadowy halls where his beloved now held court, he called out to her with all the longing of a heart that refuses to accept separation, begging her to return with him to the world of light and life. Izanami's voice emerged from the darkness, filled with both love and infinite sadness, explaining that she had already eaten the food of the underworld and could no longer return to the realm of the living. But his pleas were so heartfelt, his love so evident, that she agreed to petition the rulers of Yomi for permission to depart, asking only that he wait for her in patience, and above all, that he not attempt to look upon her transformed form until she could return to her original beauty. For what seemed like ages, Izanagi waited in the antechamber of the underworld, his divine nature wrestling with the very human impulse to look upon his beloved, regardless of the changes death might have wrought upon her. But as the time stretched on and the silence deepened, his patience finally failed him, and he lit a torch from the ever-burning fires of Yomi, raising it high to illuminate the darkness where Izanami had vanished. What he saw there, revealed in the flickering light of his torch, was a sight that would haunt him through all eternity. For death had indeed claimed his beloved, transforming her radiant beauty into something terrible and strange. Her body had begun to decay, harboring within it the maggots and demons of corruption, while her eyes, once bright with the light of creation, now glowed with the cold fire of the underworld. This was no longer his Izanami, but Izanami no Makoto, no longer, but a queen of the dead, whose dominion was darkness, and whose subjects were the spirits of decay. Her rage at his betrayal shook the foundations of Yomi itself, sending tremors through the earth above as she summoned the ugly female demons of the underworld to pursue her fleeing husband. The chase that followed became the stuff of legend, as Izanagi fled through the tunnels and caverns of the underworld, hurling behind him obstacles to slow his pursuers, his fear giving him speed, even as his heart broke with the knowledge that his love had been transformed into its opposite, that the wife who had helped him create the world now sought his destruction. Finally reaching the entrance to Yomi, he blocked the passage with an enormous boulder, sealing forever the boundary between the realm of the living and the land of the dead. From opposite sides of this stone barrier, the divine couple spoke their final words to each other, Izanami promising to take 1,000 lives each day from the world above, while Izanagi vowed to create 1,500 new lives daily, ensuring that life would always triumph over death, that creation would always outpace destruction, even as both forces continued their eternal dance through all the ages to come. Emerging from the underworld, polluted by his contact with death, Izanagi sought purification in the waters of a sacred river. And as he washed away the taint of Yomi from his divine form, new deities were born from the ritual cleansing. From the washing of his left eye emerged Amaterasu, the radiant goddess of the sun, whose light would bring warmth and life to the world. While from his right eye came Tsukuyomi, the quiet god of the moon, who would govern the cycles of night and the mysterious tides that follow lunar phases. Finally, from the washing of his nose was born Susanoo, the tempestuous god of storms and seas, whose wild nature would both threaten and renew the world in endless cycles of destruction and rebirth. These three great deities, born from their father's purification, would inherit the governance of the three realms, Amaterasu taking dominion over the heavens and the world of light, Tsukuyomi ruling the night and the subtle influences of lunar cycles, while Susanoo claimed the seas and storms as his domain, his passionate nature making him both a force of terrible destruction and necessary renewal. As the first light of Amaterasu's reign began to illuminate the newly formed islands of Japan, the world witnessed the dawn of a new age, one in which the divine and mortal realms would interweave like threads in an endless tapestry, creating patterns of myth and meaning that would endure for thousands of years. The sun goddess rose into the sky like a golden phoenix, her radiance banishing the shadows that had lingered since the closing of Yomi's gates, bringing warmth to the mountains and valleys, light to the forests and rivers, and hope to all the creatures that would soon populate these blessed islands. From her celestial palace in Takamagara, the high plain of heaven, Amaterasu looked down upon the world with eyes that held both the fierce intensity of noon and the gentle warmth of dawn, seeing in the landscape below not just the creation of her parents, but the canvas upon which she would paint the daily masterpiece of light and shadow that would regulate the rhythms of all life. Her light touched the peaks of the highest mountains first, setting them ablaze like lanterns against the purple sky, then flowed down into the valleys, where morning mist rose from rivers and lakes like the breath of sleeping dragons. The goddess understood that her role was not merely to provide light, but to nurture the delicate balance between illumination and shadow, heat and coolness, growth and rest that would allow life to flourish in all its myriad forms. She watched over the changing seasons with maternal care, her light growing stronger during the spring months to encourage the flowering of cherry blossoms and the planting of rice, then mellowing into the golden warmth of summer that would ripen the grain and fill the nets of fishermen with silver-scaled abundance. But Amaterasu's light was not without its challenges for her brothers, born from the same divine purification, possessed natures that would often conflict with her gentle governance. Tsukuyomi, the moon god, ruled the realm of night with a cool detachment that sometimes seemed almost hostile to his sister's warm embrace of the world, while Susanoo's violent storms could darken her skies and lash her light with rain and wind that threatened to extinguish the very life she sought to nurture. The greatest test of Amaterasu's strength and wisdom would come through her tumultuous relationship with Susanoo, whose wild nature made him both beloved and feared among the deities of heaven and earth. Where Amaterasu brought order and gentle progression, Susanoo brought chaos and sudden change. His storms capable of destroying entire forests in a single night or filling rivers to overflowing, washing away the careful work of farmers and reshaping the very landscape with the raw power of elemental force. Initially, the siblings found ways to complement each other. Amaterasu's steady light providing the energy for growth, while Susanoo's rains nourished the earth and his winds carried seeds to new locations where they might take root and flourish. The interplay between sun and storm created some of the most beautiful phenomena in the natural world, as rainbows arced across storm-darkened skies and sunlight streaming through breaking clouds created cathedral beams that seemed to connect heaven and earth in pillars of golden light. But Susanoo's nature contained elements that could not be tamed or channeled, a wildness that sought expression even when such expression threatened the very order that Amaterasu worked so carefully to maintain. His grief at being separated from his mother, Izanami, manifested as terrible tantrums that shook the foundations of both heaven and earth, his tears falling as torrential rains that flooded valleys, and his rage manifesting as typhoons that scoured the coasts with winds that could uproot ancient trees and level entire forests. The patience of the sun goddess was tested to its limits as she attempted to soothe her brother's violent moods, offering him comfort and understanding, even as his storms damaged the delicate ecosystems she had worked so hard to establish. She saw in his rage not mere destructiveness, but a profound grief that needed expression, a passionate nature that required outlets for its intensity. And she tried repeatedly to channel his power in ways that would benefit rather than threaten the growing world below. Their relationship reached a critical point when Susanoo, feeling rejected and misunderstood by the other deities of heaven, challenged his sister to a contest that would prove his benevolent intentions once and for all. New deities that would demonstrate the true nature of their intentions toward the world. Amaterasu accepted this challenge with some reluctance, sensing that her brother's motivations were more complex than he admitted, but hoping that through competition they might find a way to work together more harmoniously. The contest itself became a magnificent display of divine creativity, as each sibling drew upon different aspects of their power to bring new gods and goddesses into existence. From Susanoo's sword, broken into 3 pieces and purified in the sacred well of heaven, Amaterasu created 3 graceful goddesses whose beauty and wisdom would guide humanity in matters of art and culture, while from her own sacred jewels, Susanoo brought forth 5 powerful male deities whose strength would protect the islands from invasion and disaster. But rather than accepting graceful defeat, Susanoo declared victory for himself and celebrated with such wild abandon that his revelry threatened to destroy the very foundations of heaven itself. The final provocation came when Susanoo's revelry invaded the sacred weaving hall, where Amaterasu and her celestial maidens worked at their looms, creating the fabric from which clouds and aurora would be woven. In his drunken exuberance, he hurled a flayed horse through the roof of the hall, an act of such profound disrespect and violence that one of the weaving maidens was killed by a falling beam, her divine blood staining the sacred cloth that would never again shimmer with quite the same ethereal beauty. This final outrage proved too much for even Amaterasu's infinite patience, and in her grief and rage, she retreated to the Amano Iwato, the heavenly rock cave, sealing herself inside with a boulder that no force could move. With the sun goddess hidden away in darkness, her light vanished from both heaven and earth, plunging all existence into a perpetual night that threatened to return the world to the primordial chaos from which it had emerged. The consequences of Amaterasu's withdrawal were immediate and catastrophic as crops withered without sunlight, rivers froze in the absence of solar warmth, and the delicate balance between light and dark that governed all natural cycles collapsed into a uniform darkness that bred confusion and despair. The other deities of heaven gathered in emergency council, desperately seeking some way to coax their sister from her self-imposed exile, knowing that without her light, the world below would soon become uninhabitable for all the life forms that depended upon solar energy for their survival. Every attempt at persuasion failed, from gentle entreaties to elaborate ceremonies designed to appeal to her sense of duty. But the sun goddess remained sealed within her cave, her grief and anger too profound to be easily overcome. The other deities could hear her weeping through the stone, a sound that broke their hearts, even as it reminded them of the depth of pain that Susanoo's thoughtless actions had caused not just to the weaving maiden who had died, but to Amaterasu herself, whose faith in her brother's better nature had been shattered, along with the peace of heaven. Finally, the wise goddess Amnozum conceived a plan that would draw upon Amaterasu's curiosity rather than her sense of duty, understanding that grief sometimes requires distraction rather than direct confrontation. Outside the sealed cave, she began to perform a dance of such wild abandon and comic sensuality that the assembled deities burst into laughter, their mirth echoing through the darkness like the first bird songs of spring. The dance involved elaborate costumes and exaggerated movements that grew increasingly ridiculous, culminating in moments of strategic undress that sent the divine audience into paroxysms of delighted laughter. From within her cave, Amaterasu could hear the sounds of celebration and joy, emotions that seemed impossible in a world plunged into eternal darkness, and her curiosity finally overcame her determination to remain hidden. How could the other deities be celebrating when the world was dying without her light? What could possibly have inspired such merriment in the face of cosmic catastrophe? Unable to resist the mystery, she moved the boulder just slightly, creating a crack through which she could peer out at the festivities. The moment her divine radiance began to shine through that narrow opening, the world stirred back to life plants, turning toward even that faint light like worshippers, greeting the dawn while the assembled deities gasped in relief at the sight of their beloved sun goddess. But they were prepared for this moment, and the strong-armed deity, Amaterasu, seized the boulder and hurled it aside before Amaterasu could change her mind and retreat once more into darkness. Simultaneously, other deities stretched a sacred rope across the entrance to the cave, preventing any future withdrawal, while mirrors were positioned to reflect her light back at her, showing her the beauty and necessity of her own radiance. Seeing herself reflected in the divine mirrors, Amaterasu was reminded of her own glory and the vital role she played in maintaining the cosmic order, her grief beginning to transform into a renewed sense of purpose and responsibility. The other deities crowded around her, their relief and joy so evident that she could not help but be moved by their devotion, their desperate need for her light, revealing to her how thoroughly her existence was woven into the fabric of all creation. As she emerged fully from the cave, her light flooded back into the world with such intensity that flowers bloomed instantly, snow melted into rushing streams, and the very air seemed to sparkle with renewed vitality. But this return was not without its conditions, for the assembled deities had learned from this crisis the need to establish better boundaries and clearer consequences for actions that threatened the cosmic order. Susanoo, whose thoughtless violence had precipitated the crisis, was banished from heaven, stripped of his divine hair and nails, and sentenced to wander the earth until he could learn to channel his passionate nature in ways that supported rather than threatened the delicate balance of creation. This punishment, severe though it seemed, would ultimately become the catalyst for Susanoo's greatest triumph and his redemption in the eyes of his sister and the other deities of heaven. Cast down from the celestial realm, he wandered through the mountains and valleys of the newly formed islands, learning for the first time what it meant to experience the world from the perspective of its inhabitants rather than its rulers. He saw how his storms affected the rice farmers, who depended on predictable weather patterns, witnessed the fear in fishing villages when his typhoons threatened their boats, and began to understand that power without wisdom was mere destruction, regardless of the nobility of one's intentions. In the land of Izuma, his wanderings brought him to a river where he encountered an elderly couple weeping beside the waters, their grief so profound that it seemed to darken the very air around them. When he inquired about the source of their sorrow, they told him of the terrible Yamata no Orochi, an enormous serpent with 8 heads and 8 tails, eyes like red winter cherries, and a body so vast that it could span 8 valleys and 8 hills. When it stretched its full length across the landscape, this monstrous creature had been terrorizing their family for years, each year claiming one of their daughters as tribute. Until now, only their youngest, Kushianaheim, remained. Tonight was the night appointed for her sacrifice, and the old couple faced the unbearable choice between watching their last child devoured by the beast or fleeing their ancestral home, leaving her behind to face the monster alone. Their anguish touched something deep within Susanoo's heart, reminding him of his own grief at being separated from his family. And he felt for the first time the desire to use his power not for his own emotional release, but for the protection of others. Kushianaheim herself was a vision of ethereal beauty, her grace and gentle dignity reminding Susanoo of his sister, Amaterasu, at her most serene, and he found himself moved not just by compassion, but by a growing love that transformed his very understanding of his own nature. Here was someone worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth changing for. And in that moment of recognition, the storm god began his true transformation from a force of chaos into a defender of order and beauty. The plan he devised to defeat Yamata no Orochi required patience and cunning rather than brute force, qualities that the old Susanoo had never needed to develop, but which his exile had begun to teach him. He instructed the old couple to prepare 8 vats of the strongest sake rice wine, fermented to a potency that would intoxicate even a creature of supernatural power, and to position these vessels around their home in a pattern that would force the serpent to stretch its 8 heads wide apart in order to reach each container. When the night of sacrifice arrived and the monstrous serpent emerged from its lair among the mountains, its scales gleaming like black armor in the moonlight, and its 8 heads weaving hypnotically as it scented the air for its expected victim, it found instead the irresistible aroma of the powerful sake that Susanoo had prepared. Unable to resist the potent liquor, each of the creature's heads began to drink from a separate vat, the alcohol flowing down 8 throats into a body that, despite its supernatural nature, was still subject to the effects of intoxication. As the sake worked its magic, the great serpent's movements became sluggish, its 8 heads beginning to droop as consciousness faded, until finally the creature collapsed in a stupor so profound that even its supernatural healing abilities were suppressed. This was the moment Susanoo had been waiting for, and drawing his divine sword, he began the methodical work of destroying the beast that had terrorized the land for so many years, his blade cutting through scales and flesh with surgical precision. The battle, though one-sided due to his strategy, was still a monumental undertaking, for the creature's body was so vast that cutting through it required hours of continuous effort, his sword growing hot from the friction of cutting through supernatural flesh and bone. But when he reached the 4th tail, his blade struck something harder than bone harder, even than the divine metals of heaven and the impact sent vibrations up his arm that told him he had discovered something of profound significance. Cutting more carefully around this obstruction, he extracted from the serpent's body a sword of incredible beauty and power, its blade gleaming with a light that seemed to contain all the colors of the rainbow, while somehow remaining pure and white as fresh snow. This was Kusanagi, the grass-cutting sword, a weapon of such perfect balance and sharpness that it could slice through any material in existence. Yet it carried within it no malice or bloodthirst, only the pure intention to protect and defend. The discovery of this sacred weapon within the body of the monster marked not just Susanoo's victory over the serpent, but his transformation from a destroyer into a protector, from a force of chaos into a champion of order. He recognized immediately that this sword was not meant for his own use, but was a gift intended for his sister, Amaterasu, a token of his repentance and his commitment to supporting rather than threatening the cosmic harmony she worked so hard to maintain. The presentation of Kusanagi to Amaterasu became the moment of reconciliation between the sibling deities, her acceptance of the gift representing not just forgiveness, but recognition of the genuine change that had occurred in her brother's character. The sword would eventually be passed down to the imperial line of Japan, becoming one of the 3 sacred treasures that symbolized the divine right to rule. But more immediately, it served as a bridge of understanding between storm and sun, chaos and order, passion and wisdom. With his redemption complete and his place in the cosmic order re-established, Susanoo settled in Izuma, where he married Kushianadaheim and began to learn the deeper lessons of love and responsibility that would complete his transformation from a wild force of nature into a mature deity capable of both power and restraint. Their palace became a place where storms were born, not from rage or grief, but from the necessity of bringing rain to thirsty fields and clearing stagnant air with purifying winds. In the realm of earthly spirits, where the divine and mortal worlds interweave like silk threads in a master weaver's tapestry, there exists no creature more enigmatic or captivating than the kitsune, the fox spirit, whose very essence embodies the fluid nature of reality itself. These beings dwell in the twilight spaces between truth and illusion, wisdom and mischief, serving and deceiving, their existence a reminder that the world is far more complex and mysterious than human understanding typically grasps. The kitsune appear first as ordinary foxes, their red fur gleaming like autumn leaves in the filtered sunlight of ancient forests, their amber eyes holding depths of intelligence that hint at secrets older than memory. But to see them only in this form is to miss entirely the profound mystery of their nature. For these spirits possess the ability to assume human shape with such perfection that even the most perceptive observer might spend years in their company without detecting their true identity. Their transformations are not mere illusions, but genuine shape-shifting that involves every aspect of their being, from the physical form that can walk among humans without detection to the emotional and intellectual capabilities that allow them to understand and manipulate human nature with extraordinary subtlety. A kitsune might appear as a beautiful woman whose grace and wisdom attract the attention of scholars and poets, or as a humble servant whose quiet competence gradually becomes indispensable to a household, or even as a child whose innocent questions reveal uncomfortable truths about the adult world. The power of a kitsune grows with age and wisdom, measured in the number of tails they possess, each additional appendage representing centuries of accumulated knowledge and spiritual development. The youngest kitsune have but a single tail and relatively limited powers, capable of simple illusions and basic shape-shifting. But as they mature through decades and centuries of existence, they develop additional tails that bring ever greater abilities and deeper understanding of both the natural and supernatural worlds. Those rare kitsune who achieve 9 tails, the legendary Kyubi no kitsune, have transcended the normal limitations of their species to become beings of almost godlike power and wisdom, capable of feats that rival those of the great deities themselves. These ancient spirits can command the forces of nature, see across vast distances and through time itself, and understand the hidden connections that bind all living things together in the great web of existence. But power, as the kitsune well understand, is meaningless without purpose, and their purposes are as varied and complex as the spirits themselves. Some serve as messengers and servants of Inari, the rice deity whose blessings ensure abundant harvests and prosperous commerce. These celestial kitsune appearing at shrines throughout Japan to accept offerings and carry prayers to their divine master. Their presence at these sacred sites is considered highly auspicious, a sign that the petitioner's requests have been heard and will be favorably considered. Others operate as teachers and guides, appearing to humans who have reached crucial moments in their spiritual development, offering lessons that come wrapped in riddles and challenges designed to promote growth rather than provide easy answers. These encounters often leave the human participant forever changed, possessing new insights into the nature of reality and their own place within the cosmic order. Though they may not fully understand the source of their transformation until years later. Yet there are also kitsune whose motivations spring from more earthly concerns. Spirits who involve themselves in human affairs for reasons that range from genuine affection to simple curiosity about the brief, intense lives of mortal beings. These kitsune might fall in love with humans, entering into relationships that can last for decades and produce children who inherit something of their supernatural parentess abilities and otherworldly perspective. The children of such unions often become bridges between the human and spirit worlds, possessing the ability to see through illusions and communicate with supernatural beings, while still maintaining their connection to human society. Their lives are typically marked by both great fortune and great complexity, as they navigate between two worlds that operate according to different rules and expectations, serving sometimes as mediators in conflicts between humans and spirits. The most famous tales of kitsune romance speak of foxwives who serve their human husbands with perfect devotion for years or even decades, managing households with supernatural efficiency, raising children with wisdom that seems to come from depths of experience impossible for their apparent age, and providing counsel that invariably proves beneficial despite its sometimes cryptic nature. These relationships often end in tragedy, not through any failing of love, but because the fundamental differences between mortal and immortal natures eventually create insurmountable obstacles. The human partner may discover his wife's true nature through accident or carelessness on her part, breaking the spell of illusion that has sustained their relationship, or he may simply grow old and die. While she remains eternally young, their different relationships to time making permanent union impossible. In some tales, the discovery of the wife's supernatural nature leads to rejection and abandonment, the human unable to reconcile his love for the woman with his fear of the fox spirit, while in others, the knowledge brings deeper understanding and acceptance, though it cannot overcome the practical impossibilities of the situation. The kitsune themselves approach these relationships with full knowledge of their likely outcomes, their immortal perspectives, allowing them to see the entire arc of a human lifetime as a brief but intense experience worth pursuing for its own sake rather than its duration. They love fully and completely, experiencing in compressed time emotional intensities that might take centuries to develop in relationships with their own kind, finding in human passion and vulnerability qualities that their own nature lacks. When these relationships end, as they almost inevitably must, the kitsune typically withdraw quietly, leaving behind only subtle signs of their supernatural nature and memories that the human partner may come to question as he ages, wondering whether the perfect love of his youth was real or merely a beautiful dream. The children of such unions, however, carry forward the legacy of both worlds, their descendants often displaying unusual intuition, longevity, or success in endeavors that require understanding of hidden patterns and connections. Not all kitsune interactions with humans are motivated by love or service, for there are among these spirits those whose nature tends toward mischief and trickery, beings who find entertainment in the confusion and frustration of mortals who take themselves too seriously. These trickster kitsune are not malicious in the way that demons or evil spirits might be, but rather serve as agents of cosmic humor, deflating pompous officials, exposing hypocrisy in religious leaders, and generally ensuring that human pride does not grow so inflated as to forget its proper place in the larger order of things. Their pranks range from simple illusions that cause travelers to lose their way on familiar paths to elaborate deceptions that might convince an entire village that their corrupt magistrate has been transformed into a monkey, or that their stingy merchant has suddenly become generous beyond all reason. These deceptions often carry within them moral lessons, teaching their victims humility, compassion, or honesty through experiences that are simultaneously embarrassing and enlightening. The shape-shifting abilities of trickster kitsune allow them to craft elaborate theatrical performances in which unsuspecting humans become both audience and unwitting participants, their reactions providing entertainment for the fox spirit, while simultaneously revealing truths about their own character and motivations. A kitsune might appear as a helpless traveler, testing the charity of those they encounter, or as a wealthy merchant, observing how people behave when they believe they have something to gain from kindness. These tests and trials serve purposes beyond mere entertainment. For the kitsune understand that humans often learn more effectively through experience than through instruction, that a single embarrassing encounter with the consequences of selfishness may accomplish more than years of moral lecturing. Their tricks, while sometimes temporarily uncomfortable for their targets, typically result in positive changes in behavior and attitude, leaving their victims wiser, if not always grateful for the education they have received. The relationship between kitsune and human society reflects the broader Japanese understanding of the spiritual world as an active participant in daily life, rather than a distant realm accessible only through special rituals or exceptional circumstances. Fox spirits appear in rice fields and marketplaces, in temples and private homes, in forests and cities. Their presence a constant reminder that the boundaries between the natural and supernatural worlds are far more permeable than rational thinking might suggest. Their shape-shifting abilities serve as metaphors for the fluid nature of identity itself, challenging human assumptions about the stability and reliability of appearances, encouraging a more flexible and open-minded approach to understanding reality. In a world where a helpful neighbor might be a 13-year-old fox spirit, and where the most beautiful woman in the village might vanish one morning, leaving only paw prints in the garden, the wise person learns to judge others by their actions rather than their apparent nature. The enduring popularity of kitsune in Japanese folklore reflects not just fascination with their magical abilities, but recognition of the deeper truths they represent about the relationship between wisdom and power, love and loss, permanence and change. They embody the paradoxes that lie at the heart of existence itself, beings of great power who choose to involve themselves in the small dramas of human life, immortal spirits who find meaning in temporary relationships, teachers who instruct through deception rather than direct communication. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the boundary between sleep and waking grows thin, and the mind becomes receptive to subtler truths than daylight typically reveals, the kitsune move through the world with purposes that encompass both the playful and the profound, serving as reminders that reality is far stranger and more wonderful than conventional wisdom suggests, that magic exists not in distant realms, but in the spaces between certainty and doubt, appearance and truth, the known and the mysterious. Along the meandering rivers and still ponds that dot the Japanese landscape, like mirrors reflecting the changing sky, there dwells a creature that embodies the darker currents of folklore, the mysterious and unsettling kappa, whose presence transforms peaceful waterways into places of wonder and warning. These water spirits inhabit the liminal spaces where land meets water, where the familiar gives way to the unknown, their very existence serving as a reminder that nature's beauty often conceals depths that human understanding struggles to fathom. The kappa's appearance reflects the hybrid nature of their existence, beings that seem to have emerged from the fevered imagination of someone who dreamed of combining child and turtle, human and reptile, innocence and ancient wisdom. Their bodies, roughly the size of a 10-year-old child, are covered in skin that shifts between green and gray, depending upon the light, and their mood scales glimmering with the perpetual dampness of creatures who divide their time between water and air. Their faces, while humanoid in basic structure, possess features that speak of their aquatic nature, with large, round eyes adapted for seeing beneath the surface of murky water, and mouths filled with teeth designed for grasping slippery prey. Most distinctive of all their features is the depression atop their heads, a bowl-like cavity filled with water that serves as both the source of their supernatural strength and their greatest vulnerability. This water, drawn from their native streams and ponds, must remain in the depression for the kappa to maintain their power, and should it spill or dry up, they become as helpless as any ordinary creature, their supernatural abilities draining away like water through cracked earth. The relationship between kappa and water goes beyond mere dependence, representing a spiritual connection that binds these beings to the rivers and ponds they inhabit with threads stronger than blood or birth. Each kappa knows intimately every stone and weed in their aquatic domain, can sense the health of fish populations and the purity of water with senses that far exceed those of any human, and feels personally responsible for maintaining the delicate balance that allows their waterway to support life. This intimate connection makes them fiercely territorial, quick to challenge any perceived threat to their domain, whether it comes in the form of pollution, overfishing, or simple human carelessness that shows disrespect for the water and its inhabitants. Their reactions to such intrusions can range from minor mischief, designed to warn off the offenders, to more serious interventions that might leave the transgressor with a permanent reminder of the importance of respecting nature as boundaries. Yet the kappa's relationship with humans is far more complex than simple. Antagonism for these water spirits recognize in humanity both the greatest threat and the greatest potential ally in their efforts to maintain the health of their aquatic domains. Some humans, they have observed, demonstrate genuine understanding of the interconnectedness of all life, showing proper respect for water as the foundation of existence and taking care to minimize their impact on aquatic ecosystems. These respectful humans may find themselves unexpectedly aided by kappa intervention, discovering that their fishing nets are fuller than expected, that their rice fields receive exactly the right amount of water for optimal growth, or that their children, despite playing near dangerous currents, somehow manage to avoid accidents that might otherwise prove fatal. The kappa's protection, while rarely acknowledged directly, creates a subtle but significant improvement in the fortunes of those who demonstrate proper respect for the water world. Conversely, those who show carelessness or disrespect toward rivers and ponds may find themselves subject to the kappa's legendary pranks and challenges, encounters designed to teach lessons about humility and respect through direct, memorable experience. These interventions typically begin with minor annoyances, fishing lines that tangle for no apparent reason, boats that develop mysterious leaks, or swimmers who find themselves briefly disoriented underwater, surfacing with new appreciation for the power and unpredictability of aquatic environments. The most famous of kappa challenges involves sumo wrestling, a contest that plays to both the creature's incredible strength and their rigid adherence to rules of courtesy and honor that govern supernatural beings. When a kappa feels that someone has shown particular disrespect for their domain, they may appear on the riverbank and formally challenge the offender to a wrestling match, their polite bow serving as both greeting and trap for when the human instinctively returns the bow. The water spills from the kappa's head depression, leaving them weakened and vulnerable. This ritual combat serves multiple purposes beyond simple contest or punishment for it. Creates a formal framework within which human and spirit may interact according to mutually understood rules, transforming what might otherwise be a chaotic encounter into a structured engagement that can lead to mutual respect and understanding. The wise human who recognizes the true nature of such a challenge may use the opportunity not just to defeat their opponent, but to establish a relationship based on respect rather than fear. The kappa's legendary politeness, even in confrontational situations, reflects deeper aspects of their nature that connect them to the formal structures of Japanese society. Their behavior governed by codes of conduct that value proper form and respectful interaction even between enemies. This adherence to social protocols makes them paradoxical figures, creatures whose wild, unpredictable nature is balanced by rigid observance of traditional courtesies and obligations. Their knowledge of human social structures extends beyond mere etiquette to encompass detailed understanding of how human communities function. Information they gather through careful observation during their frequent ventures onto land to interact with the human world. This intelligence makes them formidable opponents when they choose confrontation, for they understand not just individual human psychology, but the social pressures and expectations that govern human behavior in various contexts. Yet this same understanding also makes them valuable allies for those fortunate enough to earn their respect and friendship. For a kappa's assistance brings with it not just supernatural power, but deep practical knowledge of local conditions, seasonal patterns, and the subtle environmental factors that can mean the difference between prosperity and disaster for communities that depend upon rivers and ponds for their survival. The seasonal cycles that govern all life in Japan hold special significance for the kappa, whose activities and moods shift dramatically with the changing year, their behavior reflecting the varying conditions of their aquatic homes. During spring, when melting snow swells rivers and streams, they become more active and adventurous, their increased power making them both more helpful to allies and more dangerous to those who cross them. Summer finds them at their most playful, engaging in elaborate pranks and challenges that take advantage of the warm weather that draws humans to swimming and river activities. Autumn brings a more contemplative phase as the kappa prepare for winter by securing their territories and establishing the caches of food and resources that will sustain them through the cold months ahead. This preparation often involves interactions with human communities, as the water spirits seek to establish mutually beneficial arrangements that will provide security for both parties during the harsh season to come. Winter transforms the kappa into almost entirely different creatures, their usual playfulness replaced by a serious dedication to survival that requires all their supernatural abilities and accumulated wisdom. When rivers freeze over and surface water becomes scarce, they must rely upon deep pools and underground streams that remain liquid through the coldest months. Their intimate knowledge of local hydrology becoming literally a matter of life and death. The stories told about kappa during these winter months often emphasize their role as guardians of stored water and protectors of the springs and wells that communities depend upon when rivers are frozen or reduced to mere trickles. Their supernatural ability to prevent water from freezing or becoming contaminated makes them invaluable allies during harsh winters, though their services typically come with expectations of respect and reciprocity that extend well beyond the winter season. Spring's return brings renewed activity and a settling of accounts from the previous year's interactions. As the Kappa emerge from their winter refuges to assess the changes that have occurred in their absence and to renew or revise their relationships with the human communities that share their watersheds. This annual cycle of withdrawal and re-engagement creates rhythms of interaction that become deeply embedded in local folklore and customs. With certain times of year recognized as particularly auspicious or dangerous for encounters with water spirits, the enduring fascination with Kappa in Japanese culture reflects their embodiment of nature's dual character as both nurturer and destroyer, protector and threat, wise teacher and dangerous adversary. They represent the unpredictable power of water itself, essential for life, yet capable of causing devastating floods. Gentle enough to cradle a child, yet strong enough to carve canyons through solid rock, clear and pure in its natural state, yet easily contaminated by human carelessness. In the deep quiet of evening, when shadows lengthen across still pools and the surface of rivers reflects, the first stars, like scattered diamonds, the Kappa, move through their domains with purposes that encompass both the immediate needs of their aquatic territories and the longer-term balance between human civilization and the natural world. Their presence serving as a bridge between two realms that must learn to coexist, if either is to thrive in the ages to come. Throughout the islands of Japan, from the smallest village shrine, nestled among ancient cedar trees, to the grand imperial sanctuaries that serve as focal points for national spiritual identity, there exists a presence both subtle and profound, an awareness that transcends the boundaries between sacred and secular, natural and supernatural, the everyday and the eternal. This is the realm of the kami, the countless spirits that inhabit not just designated holy places, but every mountain and valley, every tree and stone, every river and grain of rice, creating a spiritual landscape where the divine permeates ordinary experience with quiet, persistent grace. The concept of kami defies easy translation into languages that distinguish sharply between the sacred and profane. For these spirits represent an understanding of divinity that sees holiness not as something separate from the natural world, but as its fundamental essence, the animating force that gives meaning and significance to all existence. A kami might dwell within the towering cryptomeria that has stood for 1,000 years beside a mountain path, its presence felt by travelers who pause in its shade and find themselves filled with inexplicable peace. Or it might inhabit the simple stone that marks a crossroads, blessing all who pass with safe journey and clear direction. This ubiquitous presence transforms the landscape itself into a vast, interconnected temple, where every step might bring encounter with the sacred, where ordinary activities like drawing water from a well or harvesting rice from a field become acts of communion with divine forces that sustain and nurture all life. The kami do not demand elaborate rituals or complex theological understanding, but respond to simple acknowledgement, to the bow of respect offered to an ancient tree, to the brief prayer whispered before preparing food, to the moment of gratitude felt while watching sunrise paint the mountains gold. In homes throughout Japan, the kamidana, or spirit shelf, creates a sacred space within the domestic realm where the kami of the household receive daily offerings of rice, salt, and water. Their presence, acknowledged through simple rituals that weave worship into the fabric of everyday life. These humble altars, often barely noticeable to casual observers represent profound philosophical statements about the nature of divinity and its relationship to human existence, declaring that the sacred is not confined to special buildings or designated times, but permeates every aspect of life for those who learn to recognize its presence. The kami that inhabit these household shrines are often ancestors who have been elevated to divine status through the love and remembrance of their descendants, their spirits continuing to participate in family life as protectors and guides whose wisdom transcends the boundary between life and death. Their presence provides continuity across generations, linking the living to their heritage while ensuring that the accumulated wisdom of the past remains available to guide present decisions and future planning. Family kami receive offerings not just of food and drink, but of information and consultation, their descendants sharing news of births and deaths, marriages and business ventures, seeking guidance through prayers that often resemble conversations with beloved grandparents rather than formal religious observances. This intimate relationship with ancestral spirits creates a spiritual framework that encompasses both cosmic significance and personal relevance, connecting individual lives to both divine purpose and family heritage. Beyond the household, the kami manifest in countless local spirits that inhabit specific places and preside over particular activities, their presence shaping community life through festivals and ceremonies that celebrate seasonal cycles and agricultural milestones. The rice kami, whose blessing ensures abundant harvests, receives elaborate attention during planting and harvest seasons, while the mountain kami are honored by hunters and woodsmen who depend upon forest resources for their livelihood. These local kami often possess distinct personalities and preferences that reflect the character of their domains. The spirit of a gentle stream, differing markedly from that of a turbulent mountain torrent. The kami of cherry groves, expressing different qualities from those that inhabit bamboo forests or pine-covered slopes. Learning to recognize and respect these differences becomes part of the practical wisdom necessary for living successfully in harmony with the natural world. Each locale requiring its own approaches to establishing proper relationships with the spirits that govern local conditions. The network of shrines that dots the Japanese landscape serves as focal points for these relationships, providing spaces where the kami can receive formal recognition and where communities can gather to honor the spirits that sustain their local environment. These sacred sites range from elaborate complexes with multiple buildings and dozens of priests to simple clearings marked only by a sacred rope and a few stones. Their significance determined not by architectural grandeur, but by the depth of spiritual connection they facilitate between human communities and their local kami. The torii gates that mark the entrances to these sacred spaces serve as more than decorative elements, functioning as thresholds between the ordinary world and spaces where divine presence is particularly concentrated. Their simple elegance inviting contemplation, while their symbolic significance reminds visitors that they are entering a realm where different rules apply, where respectful behavior and mindful attention become forms of worship. Walking through a torii gate initiates a subtle transformation in consciousness, a shift from the concerns of everyday life to awareness of deeper currents that flow beneath surface appearances, connecting individual existence to cosmic patterns that extend far beyond personal understanding. This transition is enhanced by the natural settings of most shrines. Their locations, chosen not just for practical considerations, but for their capacity to inspire spiritual contemplation and connection with natural forces. The seasonal festivals that enliven these sacred spaces throughout the year serve as community celebrations that strengthen both social bonds and spiritual connections. Their timing coordinated with agricultural cycles and natural phenomena that have shaped Japanese life for millennia. Spring festivals celebrate the renewal of life and the promise of abundant harvests, while autumn ceremonies express gratitude for the year's blessings and seek protection during the challenging winter months ahead. These celebrations often feature performances and rituals that have been passed down through countless generations. Their forms preserving ancient wisdom about the proper relationships between humans and the spiritual forces that govern natural cycles. Traditional dances reenact mythological events, while music and chanting create atmospheres conducive to spiritual experience. The combination of art and worship creating powerful experiences that connect participants to both their cultural heritage and the divine forces that sustain life. The priests who serve at these shrines function less as intermediaries between human and divine than as facilitators who help maintain the conditions necessary for direct spiritual experience. Their training emphasizing purification practices and ritual precision that create clear channels for communication with the kami. Their daily routines of cleaning and maintenance, offering and prayer create rhythms of sacred activity that sanctify time as well as space, transforming ordinary hours into opportunities for spiritual connection and divine encounter. The practice of purification that plays such a central role in Shinto observance reflects understanding of the kami as beings of extraordinary purity, who are naturally drawn to cleanliness and order while being repelled by pollution and chaos. This purification extends beyond physical cleanliness to encompass mental and spiritual states, encouraging practitioners to approach the kami with clear minds, peaceful hearts, and intentions focused on harmony rather than personal gain. The Misagi purification rituals that involve standing beneath waterfalls or bathing in cold mountain streams represent extreme expressions of this principle. Practitioners subjecting themselves to intense physical discomfort in order to achieve states of spiritual clarity that allow for deeper communion with divine forces. These dramatic practices, while not required of ordinary worshippers, demonstrate the lengths to which serious practitioners will go in their efforts to achieve the purity of heart and mind that the kami find most appealing. The seasonal cycles that govern shrine activities also influence the behavior and accessibility of the kami themselves, their presence waxing and waning, with natural rhythms that reflect the changing needs of their human communities and the varying conditions of their natural domains. Spring brings increased activity as the kami emerge from winter dormancy to participate in the renewal of life, while summer finds them at their most active and approachable, their power augmented by the abundance of the growing season. Autumn represents a time of harvest, celebration, and preparation for winter. The kami focusing their attention on ensuring that communities have stored sufficient resources to survive the challenging months ahead, while also receiving the gratitude of humans for the year's blessings. Winter brings a period of contemplation and conservation, the kami withdrawing to some degree from active involvement in human affairs, while maintaining their essential functions as protectors and sustainers of life. This cyclical pattern of engagement and withdrawal creates rhythms of spiritual activity that become deeply embedded in community life. Certain seasons, recognized as particularly auspicious for major undertakings, while others are seen as more appropriate for reflection and preparation. Understanding these patterns becomes part of the practical wisdom necessary for living successfully within the spiritual landscape that the kami create and maintain. The influence of kami extends far beyond formal religious observance to shape fundamental attitudes toward nature, community, and the relationship between individual and collective well-being that characterize Japanese culture at its deepest levels. The recognition of divine presence in natural phenomena encourages environmental consciousness and sustainable practices, while the emphasis on purification and harmony promotes social behaviors that prioritize community welfare over individual advantage. In the gentle twilight hours, when day surrenders to night and the boundary between visible and invisible grows thin, the kami continue their ancient work of sustaining and nurturing life, their presence felt by those who learn to recognize the sacred in the ordinary, the eternal in the temporal, the divine in the natural world that surrounds and encompasses all existence, their quiet blessings, flowing like underground streams that nourish the roots of civilization itself. As darkness deepens and the familiar world of daylight gives way to the mysterious realm of shadows and dreams, Japan's folklore reveals inhabitants of a different nature entirely, beings that emerge from the collective unconscious, like figures from fever dreams, embodying fears and fascinations that lurk at the edges of human understanding. These are the oni and yokai, the demons and monsters that populate the darker corners of Japanese mythology. Creatures whose very existence challenges comfortable assumptions about the nature of reality and the boundaries between order and chaos. The oni stand among the most fearsome of these supernatural beings, giants of tremendous strength and terrible appearance, whose presence transforms peaceful landscapes into battlefields where the forces of civilization struggle against primordial chaos. Their massive forms, often reaching twice the height of ordinary humans, are covered in skin that ranges from deep red to brilliant blue colors that seem to glow with inner fire, while their faces combine human and demonic features in ways that trigger instinctive recognition of predatory intelligence coupled with supernatural malevolence. Their most distinctive features include the curved horns that emerge from their foreheads like those of great bulls, weapons in themselves that can gore and crush with devastating effectiveness, while their mouths reveal rows of fangs designed for tearing flesh and crushing bone. Their hands, enlarged to match their massive frames, end in claws capable of rending steel, while their strength exceeds that of any natural creature, allowing them to wield clubs the size of tree trunks with casual ease. Yet the true horror of the oni lies not in their physical power, but in their intelligence. For these are not mindless beasts driven by simple hunger, but calculating predators who understand human psychology well enough to exploit weaknesses and manipulate fears with sophisticated cruelty. They delight in psychological torture as much as physical violence, taking pleasure in the terror they inspire and the despair they create in their victims before delivering final destruction. The origins of oni vary depending upon the particular tradition being consulted, some describing them as humans who have been transformed by extreme evil or overwhelming emotion into monstrous forms that reflect their inner corruption, while others present them as supernatural beings that have existed since the world's creation. Ancient forces of destruction that periodically emerge to test the resolve and virtue of civilized society. The transformation of humans into Oni typically involves crimes or sins of such magnitude that they fundamentally alter the perpetrator's spiritual nature, their souls becoming so corrupted that their physical forms change to match their inner state. Murderers whose cruelty exceeds normal human understanding, tyrants whose oppression drives entire populations to despair, or individuals whose anger burns so hot that it consumes all capacity for compassion, may find themselves gradually assuming demonic characteristics that eventually complete their metamorphosis into full Oni. This transformation process serves as both explanation for the existence of Oni and warning about the consequences of abandoning human virtue. The physical horror of the demon serving as external manifestation of internal moral decay that begins with small compromises and gradually escalates until redemption becomes impossible. The message embedded in these transformation tales emphasizes the importance of maintaining ethical behavior and emotional balance, suggesting that anyone might potentially become a monster if they allow negative emotions to dominate their decision-making processes. The seasonal appearance of Oni follows patterns that reflect their role as agents of cosmic correction, emerging most frequently during times when human society has become particularly corrupt or when natural disasters require supernatural explanation. Their attacks often target individuals or communities that have violated important social or spiritual taboos, serving as harsh reminders that certain boundaries must not be crossed without consequences. Winter storms that destroy entire villages might be attributed to Oni whose rage has been triggered by human arrogance or disrespect toward natural forces, while plagues and famines could result from demonic intervention designed to punish communities for moral failures or religious negligence. These explanations provide frameworks for understanding catastrophic events while emphasizing human responsibility for maintaining proper relationships with both divine and demonic forces. The varieties of yokai that populate Japanese folklore present an even more diverse and unpredictable collection of supernatural beings, creatures that range from mildly mischievous to genuinely dangerous their forms and behaviors, reflecting the infinite creativity of human imagination when confronted with phenomena that defy rational explanation. Unlike Oni, whose nature tends toward consistent malevolence, yokai exhibit the full spectrum of possible motivations and moral orientations, some helping humans while others harm them, many simply pursuing their own incomprehensible agendas with little regard for human welfare. The shape-shifting abilities common among yokai allow them to assume forms that challenge human perceptions and expectations, appearing as ordinary objects that suddenly reveal supernatural properties, familiar animals that display impossible intelligence, or human figures whose subtle abnormalities gradually become apparent to careful observers. This constant potential for transformation creates an atmosphere of uncertainty where nothing can be taken entirely at face value, where the most ordinary encounter might suddenly reveal extraordinary dimensions. Some yokai specialize in particular types of mischief or haunting, their activities following patterns that become recognizable to those who study such phenomena carefully enough to detect recurring themes and behaviors. The Kappa, with their water-based domain and complex relationship with human communities, represent just one example of how yokai can develop specialized ecological niches that allow them to interact with human society in ways that are both beneficial and threatening. Others focus on specific locations or activities, haunting particular houses or crossroads, appearing only during certain weather conditions or times of year, their behavior governed by rules that often remain mysterious to human observers but clearly follow some form of internal logic. Understanding these patterns can provide protection against dangerous yokai, while potentially allowing beneficial relationships with those whose nature tends toward helpfulness. The Bakeneko, supernatural cats, whose intelligence and magical abilities far exceed those of ordinary felines, represent yokai whose transformation from normal animals results from age and accumulated spiritual power rather than human intervention or divine curse. These creatures often maintain their relationships with human households even after their transformation, serving as both protectors and potential threats depending upon how they are treated by their human companions. Their shape-shifting abilities allow them to assume human form when necessary, often appearing as elderly women, whose wisdom and practical knowledge make them valuable advisors, though their feline nature remains apparent to those who know what signs to look for. Their loyalty to families that treat them well can extend across generations, while their vengeance against those who abuse or abandon them can be swift and terrible. The Tengu, bird-like beings, whose martial prowess and spiritual knowledge make them formidable opponents or valuable teachers, depending upon how they are approached, inhabit mountain forests where they practice combat techniques and meditation disciplines that far exceed human capabilities. Their appearance combines human and avian characteristics, with wings that allow them to fly at incredible speeds and beaks or elongated noses that give them distinctly non-human profiles. These creatures often serve as testing grounds for human warriors and monks who seek to develop their abilities beyond ordinary limitations, appearing to challenge those whose dedication and skill have reached levels that merit supernatural attention. The training they provide can transform ordinary humans into legendary figures, but their standards are impossibly high and their methods often dangerous to the point of being potentially fatal. The seasonal festivals and protective rituals that communities develop to manage their relationships with oni and yokai reflect sophisticated understanding of supernatural psychology and the importance of maintaining proper boundaries between human and demonic realms. These observances often involve elaborate performances designed to either appease dangerous spirits or drive them away, depending upon the specific threats and opportunities presented by local supernatural populations. The oni masks worn during festival celebrations serve multiple purposes, simultaneously honoring the power of demonic forces while providing psychological protection through symbolic participation in that power. By temporarily assuming demonic characteristics, participants gain insight into the nature of chaos and destruction while demonstrating their confidence in their ability to control and channel those forces rather than being overwhelmed by them. The protective charms and rituals that households employ against malevolent yokai range from simple offerings designed to appease potentially troublesome spirits to complex purification ceremonies intended to drive away entities that have already established unwelcome presences. The effectiveness of these measures often depends upon the faith and consistency with which they are applied. Supernatural beings, apparently responding to human belief and intention as much as to specific ritual actions. Children's games and songs often incorporate references to yokai and oni, serving as educational tools that teach young people to recognize signs of supernatural presence, while providing them with cultural knowledge necessary for navigating a world where the boundaries between natural and supernatural remain perpetually uncertain. These seemingly innocent activities prepare each new generation to participate in the ongoing negotiation between human communities and the spiritual forces that surround them. The psychological functions served by beliefs in oni and yokai extend far beyond simple superstition to encompass sophisticated methods for processing fear, guilt, and uncertainty, providing frameworks for understanding experiences that might otherwise prove overwhelming or incomprehensible. By externalizing internal conflicts and projecting them onto supernatural beings, individuals and communities can address psychological challenges through cultural mechanisms that have been refined through countless generations of use. In the deep hours of night, when rational thought gives way to more primitive forms of awareness, and the familiar world reveals unfamiliar dimensions, the oni and yokai continue their ancient roles as representatives of forces that exist beyond human control or complete. Understanding their presence, serving as reminders that reality encompasses far more than daylight consciousness, typically acknowledges their stories, preserving wisdom about the importance of respect, humility, and careful attention to boundaries that should not be crossed without full awareness of the potential consequences. In the intersection where divine mythology meets mortal experience, where the grand narratives of gods and goddesses touch the daily lives of farmers and fishermen, merchants and monks, there exists a realm of profound wisdom that transcends the boundary between ancient story and practical guidance. The myths of Japan have never existed merely as entertainment or historical curiosity, but have served throughout the centuries as living repositories of cultural knowledge, moral instruction, and spiritual insight that continue to shape understanding of proper relationships between individuals and community, humanity and nature, the temporal and eternal. The great cycle of creation that began with Izanagi and Izanami, stirring the primordial waters with their jeweled spear, established patterns of relationship and responsibility that echo through every level of Japanese society, from the imperial court to the humblest village shrine. Their love story, marked by both profound joy and devastating loss, teaches lessons about the nature of commitment, the inevitability of change, and the importance of accepting both creation and destruction as necessary aspects of existence. The tragedy of Izanami's death in childbirth and Izanagi, as failed attempt to rescue her from the underworld, speaks to universal human experiences of loss and the difficulty of accepting that some separations cannot be overcome through love or determination alone. Yet their story also demonstrates how even the most devastating personal losses can become sources of new creation. As Izanagi's purification after his return from Yomi gave birth to the three great deities who would govern the realms of sun, moon, and storm, Amaterasu's retreat into the celestial cave and her eventual return to illuminate the world provides a template for understanding how communities might respond to periods of darkness and crisis, emphasizing the importance of patience, creativity, and collective effort in overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges. The other deities' refusal to simply accept permanent darkness, their willingness to try innovative approaches like Aim-no-Zoom's outrageous dance, and their preparation to prevent future withdrawals, all offer practical guidance for addressing community problems that require both individual initiative and coordinated action. The sun goddess's response to her brother's destructive behavior also illustrates principles of conflict resolution that prioritize long-term relationship preservation over immediate satisfaction. Her eventual acceptance of his redemption, demonstrating the importance of forgiveness, while the consequences imposed upon him emphasize that forgiveness must be balanced with accountability and genuine change. Susanoo's transformation from destroyer to protector through his encounter with the Yamata no Orochi provides perhaps the most complete example of how mythological narrative can serve as moral instruction. His journey from exile through struggle to redemption, offering hope for anyone who has made serious mistakes and seeks to make amends. His marriage to Kushiana Dayam and his gift of the sacred sword to Amaterasu demonstrate that genuine repentance must involve not just acknowledgement of past wrongs, but positive action that benefits others. The story of the storm god's maturation also illustrates important truths about the nature of power and responsibility, showing how raw strength without wisdom leads inevitably to destruction, while power, channeled through understanding and compassion, becomes a force for protection and positive change. His defeat of the serpent required not just divine strength, but careful planning and strategic thinking, suggesting that the most important victories are won through intelligence and preparation rather than brute force alone. The complex relationships between the major deities provide models for understanding family dynamics and sibling relationships that acknowledge both the love that binds relatives together and the conflicts that can arise from different temperaments and competing needs. The eventual reconciliation between Amaterasu and Susanoo offers hope that even the most serious family conflicts can be resolved when all parties demonstrate genuine commitment to change and mutual respect. In the realm of earthly spirits, the Kitsune and Kappa serve as intermediaries between divine and human worlds, their stories providing guidance for navigating relationships that involve significant power imbalances and cultural differences. The fox spirits, shape-shifting abilities, and complex motivations teach lessons about the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to understand true character, while their romantic relationships with humans explore themes of love that transcends conventional boundaries, while acknowledging the practical challenges such relationships inevitably face. The Kappa's territorial nature and rigid adherence to formal courtesy demonstrate how respect for natural boundaries and proper etiquette can transform potentially dangerous encounters into opportunities for mutual benefit. Their legendary politeness, even when issuing challenges or seeking revenge, emphasizes the importance of maintaining civilized behavior, regardless of circumstances, while their vulnerability, when their headwater spills, reminds observers that even supernatural beings have weaknesses that can be exploited through understanding rather than force. The seasonal cycles that govern the activities of both Kitsune and Kappa provide frameworks for understanding how natural rhythms should influence human behavior. Their increased activity during certain times of year, suggesting that there are appropriate seasons for different types of endeavors and relationships. The wisdom embedded in these patterns encourages attention to environmental conditions and natural timing as factors that significantly influence the success or failure of human plans and projects. The ubiquitous presence of kami throughout the Japanese landscape transforms every human activity into potential spiritual practice, the recognition of divine presence in ordinary objects and locations, encouraging mindfulness and reverence that enhance both practical effectiveness and personal satisfaction. The daily offerings made at household shrines create rhythms of gratitude and remembrance that strengthen family bonds while maintaining connections to ancestral wisdom, while community festivals provide opportunities for collective celebration that reinforces social cohesion and shared values. The purification practices associated with kami worship emphasize the importance of approaching important endeavors with clear minds and clean hearts. The physical acts of washing and cleaning serving as external expressions of internal commitment to honesty, sincerity, and respect for others. These practices create psychological states conducive to good decision-making while demonstrating to others the seriousness of one's intentions. Even the darker figures of Oni and yokai serve important educational functions. Their frightening appearances and dangerous behaviors providing concrete representations of the consequences that follow from abandoning social virtues and ethical constraints. The transformation of humans into Oni through extreme evil or overwhelming emotion serves as cautionary tale about the importance of maintaining emotional balance and moral principles. While the various yokai represent specific types of problems that require particular kinds of wisdom and preparation to address successfully, the protective rituals and seasonal festivals developed to manage relationships with these supernatural beings demonstrate sophisticated understanding of conflict prevention and community coordination, showing how collective action and shared vigilance can address threats that no individual could handle alone. The masks and performances associated with these observances provide safe ways to explore dangerous themes, while building cultural knowledge necessary for recognizing and responding to various types of supernatural encounters. The integration of mythological themes into children's education through games, songs, and stories ensures that each new generation receives cultural knowledge necessary for participating successfully in Japanese society while maintaining connections to spiritual traditions that have guided the nation through countless challenges and changes. These seemingly simple activities preserve complex wisdom about relationship management, conflict resolution, and the importance of balance between individual desires and collective welfare. The moral lessons embedded in Japanese mythology consistently emphasize themes of respect for nature, responsibility toward community, the importance of proper relationships, and the need for balance between opposing forces, values that have shaped Japanese culture for over a millennium and continue to influence contemporary attitudes toward environmental protection, social harmony, and international relations. The enduring relevance of these ancient stories lies not in their literal truth, but in their capacity to illuminate fundamental aspects of human experience that remain constant despite changing circumstances. Their symbolic language providing frameworks for understanding complex psychological and social dynamics that rational analysis alone cannot fully encompass. They serve as bridges between conscious and unconscious knowledge, individual and collective wisdom, past experience, and future possibility. In the quiet moments between sleeping and waking, when the mind becomes receptive to deeper truths than daylight typically reveals, these mythological figures continue their ancient work of guidance and instruction, their stories serving as companions in the darkness that help illuminate the path toward wisdom, understanding, and harmony with the forces that shape both human destiny and the natural world that encompasses and sustains all life. As our journey through these ancient pathways of wisdom draws toward its close, like the last light of day, painting the mountain peaks with gold before surrendering to the gentle embrace of twilight, we find ourselves changed by our encounter with the profound spiritual landscape that Japan's mythology has revealed to us through centuries of accumulated wisdom and enduring faith. These stories, passed down through countless generations, like treasured heirlooms worn smooth by loving hands, continue to illuminate the darkness of uncertainty with their gentle radiance, offering guidance and comfort to all who seek understanding of the deeper patterns that connect individual existence to the vast tapestry of cosmic meaning. The myths we have explored together form not merely a collection of ancient tales, but a living constellation of spiritual truth, each story serving as a star in the darkness that helps navigate the complex waters of human experience with wisdom gained through millennia of careful observation and profound reflection. Like lanterns carried by pilgrims on mountain paths, they cast circles of light that reveal not just the immediate ground beneath our feet, but glimpses of the larger landscape that stretches beyond the limits of ordinary perception. In the beginning, we witnessed the birth of the world itself through the divine union of Izanagi and Izanami, their love serving as the creative force that transformed chaos into order, emptiness into abundance, separation into connection. Their story reminds us that creation requires relationship, that the most profound achievements emerge from the willingness to unite with another in service of something greater than individual desire or ambition, and that even the most devastating losses can become sources of new life and unexpected blessing. From their divine marriage came not only the physical islands of Japan, but the spiritual principles that continue to govern the relationship between heaven and earth, order and chaos, creation and destruction, teaching us that reality operates according to patterns that encompass both joy and sorrow, success and failure, union and separation as necessary aspects of a larger harmony that transcends human understanding yet remains accessible to human experience. Amaterasu's radiant presence in our journey has shown us how leadership requires not just power, but wisdom, not just authority, but compassion, not just strength, but the humility to withdraw when circumstances demand reflection, and the courage to return when communities need guidance. Her retreat into the celestial cave and triumphant emergence teach lessons about the importance of self-care and boundaries, while demonstrating that even the most essential individuals must sometimes step away from their responsibilities in order to return with renewed strength and clearer vision. The sun goddess's relationship with her tempestuous brother, Susanoo, illustrates the complex dynamics that exist within all families and communities, showing how love and conflict can coexist, how forgiveness requires both accountability and genuine change, and how the most difficult relationships often produce the most profound growth and understanding. Their eventual reconciliation offers hope for healing ancient wounds, while honoring the reality that some damage cannot be easily undone or quickly forgotten. Susanoo's own transformation from destroyer to protector through his encounter with the eight-headed serpent demonstrates the possibility of redemption even for those who have caused great harm, while emphasizing that such transformation requires not just good intentions, but concrete actions that benefit others and demonstrate genuine commitment to positive change. Show how personal healing creates ripples of blessing that extend far beyond individual experience. In the realm of earthly spirits, the kitsune have served as guides to the mysteries of transformation and relationship. Their shape-shifting abilities, representing the fluid nature of identity and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to understand true character and motivation. Their complex interactions with human communities demonstrate how wisdom often comes disguised as playfulness, how teachers may appear as tricksters, and how the most profound lessons are often learned through experience rather than instruction. The kappa, dwelling in their watery domains, have shown us the importance of respecting natural boundaries and understanding the consequences of environmental carelessness. While their legendary politeness reminds us that civilization requires courtesy even in conflict, that strength can be channeled through proper forms, and that victory achieved through understanding is more lasting than that won through force alone. The countless kami that inhabit every aspect of the natural and human world have revealed to us a vision of reality where the sacred permeates the ordinary, where divinity expresses itself through the simplest daily activities, and where reverence and gratitude transform routine existence into continuous worship. Their presence in household shrines and community festivals creates rhythms of spiritual practice that strengthen both individual character and social bonds, while their connection to seasonal cycles reminds us of our dependence upon natural forces that operate according to wisdom far greater than human planning. Even the darker figures of Oni and yokai have contributed essential knowledge to our journey, their frightening appearances and dangerous behaviors serving as externalized representations of internal conflicts and social problems that require both individual courage and collective wisdom to address effectively. Their transformation from